Good evening, everyone. My name is Lori Cobb, and I would like to call the May 27th, 2021 Madison County Board of Education meeting to order, please. And up on our agenda is our vision statement. If we could have Ms. Burford read that for us.
Absolutely. Madison County Schools, in partnership with the community, strives to equip educators and students with the skills to lead by example, develop and speak with a unique voice, and explore their academic curiosity to make a positive impact on our community and world.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much. Do we have any audience comments for agenda items? All right. So I'm going to take this quick opportunity to just remind everybody that we have received our board packets about a week ago with all the information pertaining to all of our agenda items. So we have had a chance to review those and ask any questions that we have. So please don't take our not asking a lot of questions as we don't care or we don't know. So next on our agenda item is to approve the minutes of our May 11th special meeting. Do I have a motion to do so?
I'll make the motion.
All right, we have a motion by Mrs. Burford. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, and a second by Mr. Rutherford. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No? Okay, motion carries. And then up next on our on our agenda is the superintendent's evaluation. So let me just kind of,
Special meeting.
Special meeting.
oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I missed a special meeting. I apologize. Okay, let's try this again. All right, we do need to set a special meeting, a work session on June the 3rd at 9 a.m. Do we have a motion to do so?
So moved.
All right, motion by Mr. Rutherford. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Coyle. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Now we'll move on to the superintendent's evaluation. I apologize. All right, let me just do just a real quick rundown for those of you who may not know, maybe those of you who are joining us by Facebook or YouTube. Every year, the KDE requires, which is the Kentucky Department of Education, requires that boards evaluate their superintendents. They provide the framework and the outline for us to do so. It's basically a standardized evaluation. There are 7 standards that they require that we evaluate the superintendent in, and those standards are strategic leadership, instructional leadership, cultural leadership, human resource leadership, managerial leadership, collaborative leadership, and influential leadership. And then we have to assign a rating to each of those standards. And those ratings can be exemplary, which means they exceed the standard, accomplished, which means they meet the standard, developing, makes growth toward meeting the standard, or growth required, areas that are required to be addressed. So as a board, in addition to reviewing the superintendent for the year that we're currently in, part of this evaluation process is to give Dr. Gillum some roadmap for what we would like him to focus on in the upcoming year, in our 21-22 year. So that's part of the evaluation as well. So as a board, we work together to compile this evaluation. So it is representative of all 5 of us. We each do an individual evaluation, and then when we met on May 11th, we collaborated those and compiled this final evaluation. He is very humble, and I know he struggles with hearing how pleased we are with him, so he may get red-faced as I read this summary. So let me just briefly read the summary of this board's evaluation of Dr. Gillum. So last year, the board asked Dr. Gillum to focus on Standard 1, which is strategic leadership, and Standard 5, which is managerial leadership for the 2020-2021 year. In this year's evaluation, the board has unanimously rated Dr. Gillum as exemplary in all 7 standards. As part of his professional growth plan for this upcoming year, we have asked Dr. Gillum to focus on Standard 2, which is instructional leadership, and Standard 5, managerial leadership. His primary focus in this 21-22 year will be to concentrate on introducing and overseeing an academic recovery plan to address learning gaps presented by the COVID-19 pandemic and continue working with our principals to maximize in overcoming those gaps. Dr. Gillum will also oversee our ESSER funding allocations to ensure the successful implementation and use of those funds for the betterment of our students and district. I'll remind you, those ESSER funds are the federal funds, pandemic funds that the district has received. He will also continue to oversee the completion of the Richmond and Berea Career Centers, including implementation of course content and programs, keeping the projects on time and preventing delays if possible. The Career Centers are slated to open in the spring of 2022 for our high school students. So once again, we are extremely pleased with Dr. Gillum's leadership during the past year, and we have ranked his overall evaluation as exemplary in all 7 standards. With the past school year consumed by the pandemic, we do want to note some of his significant accomplishments. So here's what we noted as his accomplishments in the 2020-2021 school year. The successful development and implementation of a very thorough district-wide strategy in response to the pandemic. The plan was extremely thorough and addressed multiple scenarios and maximum choices for staff and students. He collaborated with our community leaders throughout the pandemic, always explaining why certain steps or actions were being taken, which helped to ensure cohesive community action. In anticipation of the potential for extended online learning at the beginning of the year, he implemented a technology plan to make sure that each student had a device to use for online learning. He collaborated with the food service to feed all the Madison County students during the pandemic, both in person and option 2 and 3 students. He also coordinated with the transportation director to develop a plan to transport students safely and in accordance with state regulations. This required several changes to the logistics of transporting our students. He also anticipated additional staffing needs in response to the pandemic and added appropriate staff to maximize student learning while maintaining health guidelines and standards. Even through the pandemic, Dr. Gillum made sure the construction of the career centers continued to and progressed forward. This has allowed the project to be on time, and the target opening date of spring 2022 has not been delayed. So we are extremely proud of the progress made in his 3rd year as superintendent in Madison County Schools. This past year has no doubt been the most challenging of his career and everyone else that works in this district, as they battle the COVID-19 pandemic. It has been over 100 years since our country last saw a pandemic. There was no roadmap or guidepost to follow. The situation was constantly fluid. The board felt Dr. Gillum led with a calm demeanor and forethoughtful planning. Every step was proactive and never reactive. Other districts throughout the state were constantly reaching out to know, what is Madison County doing? While the pandemic was the primary focus of this past school year, Dr. Gillum continued to maintain high expectations in all areas for staff and students. He works collaboratively at all levels to achieve continued academic growth and excellence. He continues to be a strong physical leader who has a progressive vision for the future of Madison County schools. Dr. Gillum has proven himself to be a trusted leader not only in Madison County, but in our community. His integrity is without question, as well as his desire to always do what is best for the students of Madison County. So that is the summation of our evaluation this year. Thank you is not enough. Does anybody else have anything they want to add or say? You didn't get too red-faced with all of that. Okay.
I think we said it all to
Yeah.
him in our evaluation.
Yeah, I think we've said it, and I know this was pretty lengthy, but this was by far a very difficult year for everybody, not just Dr. Gillum, but and I'm glad to see we're moving in a different direction. Okay, so if we don't have any other questions or discussion on the evaluation? No? Okay. So I just need a motion to approve the superintendent evaluation summation as presented.
So move.
All right, we have a motion by Mrs. Burford. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second by Mrs. Coyle. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. All right, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so next on our agenda item is to approve our 2021-2022 KED membership. This is just an annual membership that we do every time at this time of the year. So do I have a motion to approve the membership of the KEDC as presented.
So moved.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Rutherford. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
And a second by Mrs. Burford. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. And then next on our agenda item is to approve the Madison Central High School archery trip to South Carolina. The motion is to approve this trip to Myrtle Beach, June the 9th through the 13th. Do we have any questions? No? Okay, do we have a motion?
So move.
Okay, we have a motion by Mrs. Burford. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second by Mrs. Coyle. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, next up, just a couple of agenda items here. They're all going to be the same. They're just going to be different schools. We have a few motions for additional teachers at certain schools that are going to be paid for by the school funds. So we'll start out with our first one. Silver Creek Elementary has requested a paraeducator. They will be using their Section 6 funds for this position, so basically it won't come out of the general fund. Do I have a motion to create and ratify one paraeducator position at Silver Creek Elementary?
So moved.
All
Second.
right, we have a motion by Mrs. Coyle and a second by Mr. Rutherford. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. And second is to create a teacher position at Glen Marshall Elementary. They are going to use 25% of their Section 6 funds and 75% of their Title I funds to pay for this position. So again, no effect on our general funds. Do we have a motion to create and ratify one teacher position at Glen Marshall Elementary?
So moved.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Rutherford. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second by Mrs. Coyle. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. And then our next teacher position and last teacher position is one teacher position at Kirksville. And they're going to use their Title I funds. So again, no effect on our general fund. So do I have a motion to create and ratify a teacher position at Kirksville Elementary?
So move.
All right, we have a motion by Mrs.
Second.
Burford and a second by Mr. Rutherford. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Okay, so next on our agenda item, we need to talk about the whole child visualization system. And we have Dr. Hunter and Dr. Brumbaugh here to talk to us about that.
It's just the regular.
Oh, here we go. Okay, I want to share with you guys what this whole child visualization system, what I want to refer to you as EduClimber is. And while I'm talking through this, please, please, please stop me at any point, ask any questions or anything like this. So here's EduClimber supports our multi-tiered system of support. And you've heard us refer to that as MTSS. MTSS, multi-tiered system of support, is what we're implementing at the district level and at each school. And what that is, you've heard us talk about our professional learning communities. Our professional learning communities is where we bring people around the table to talk about how things are going in the academic world. And we talk about data, we talk about how we can change teacher practices to increase student achievement. The MTSS is different in that we come together at the table, we invite more people like our counselors, more people like our Frisky workers, more people to talk more about the whole child. So we talk about academics, we talk about behavior, we talk about social emotional learning, we get a bigger picture about how we can all work together to help the student succeed. And so this program helps us bring all of that data together so that we can have a picture of that. So it's a little the same kind of talk as our PLC, but we look all systems together to do that. And so we're implementing now district level talks like that, where we look at the whole district, and then each school's doing that. And so this is what we're going to work through. So it helps us take all of that data together so we can have those kinds of conversations. Instead of having bits and pieces of those conversations, we can talk about it all together. These are the elements of it, and I'm going to go through these slides that talk about all of these different elements of this program to help us be able to have those kinds of conversations about a student. Because it's important for us to have those kinds of conversations so we can close all of those gaps to help our students succeed. So here's what it looks like. Here's one way that it looks. We have a student profile page, which is pretty cool for us. Because we have data everywhere. We always talk about making data-informed decisions. We have the data, but we have it in all different kinds of places. We have our iReady data, we have our behavior data, we have our social emotional learning data, we have our attendance data, we have all of this data. This program compiles it together for us on a dashboard, and we have this dashboard right here, student profile data, that we would have this so we can see this whole picture. And what it also does, it will compile multiple years worth of data in one place so that we don't have to dig through it, have all of this. It has it all right here so we can see trends, so we can see that kind of thing. So here is a closer picture of what that would look like. And I say picture because it also includes the student's picture. And sometimes that's important because we want to know who we're talking about. And so picture this, a teacher's looking at this, or a principal's looking at this, and they have all of this at their fingertips. And all of this, meaning, I know we can't read all of this, but when we've talked with this company, this program syncs with all that we're already doing. Our iReady pulls information from Infinite Campus, also all of the other different programs that we're already using, and puts it all in one place. Instead of sitting at the table and saying, okay, somebody have the iReady data, somebody have the Fontes and Pinnell that we use in our elementary schools and the AVMR, and somebody also have Infinite Campus pulled up so we can look at the attendance and look at the behavior. We have all of that on this dashboard. What we also have, which a lot of other companies don't have, I know if you can see underneath that blue part, it has interventions. This is something that other things don't have, which is where we're moving toward. It has interventions, academic and behavior interventions. What we really want to do is get on the same page with all of our schools so we can know what works, where we need to go.
So we don't have to worry about converting data into this system or someone entering it in?
Yes, I don't have any idea how that works, but it works. It syncs it all, it pulls it all for us, and it's right there. Yes, we've had LaGina Wilson, who is our Infinite Campus guru here, on the call with us with this company, and it pulls all of that. It pulls it from iReady, and it's right there. Years worth. We get to decide if we want 3 years, 5 years, all of that right there for us. Thresholds. This also is really neat. Here's what it does. It says we can work and we can try to keep track of everybody, but here's also what this can do for us. We can set different thresholds, different, actually what it creates reports for us. So we can say, okay, I want to know when I have students who are making a C or below in a class. I can run all of that for my school or my district or for all my 6th graders in the building or across the district. And it will run that because this is data that is live, that keeps update all the time. Okay, and so it can send a principal that report, It can send a principal a report who they can have all of it together, who students who are absent more than twice a week and who are C or below and who have behavior incidents. And so it will keep track of all of that. And so each Monday morning, a principal can go in, pull it up, and they have all of those names right there. And so talk about the interventions that principal can do. And then we can also look at it district-wide and know, okay, who are the students we need to keep track of that way? And so then when we sit down at the table, we can say, okay, this is what we need to be doing. And we can customize what thresholds we need to be able to keep track of. It has some already, but we can also say, okay, this is what I need, and this is where I need to be going. And then there's just a closer picture of that. Here's something else that's pretty neat. So when we're sitting at that table talking about where we need to go, we can set action items within this system. How many times have you been at a meeting and you say, okay, this is a great idea, who's going to do what? And so on a separate form, we have to keep all of that. Within this system, we can assign different roles to different persons and say, okay, for this kid, for Alicia, here's who's going to keep track of this. And we have it all in there together. So then when we pull it up, all my teachers will know, here's who's responsible for this, here's who's responsible for that. And we can keep track of that within that system. So then when they pull up my dashboard and look under my interventions or look under my action plan, they know who's responsible for what. And so that is what can be wonderful with this system. All right there on my dashboard. And so here's the intervention and progress monitoring part. And so this has interventions within it, but can also take the interventions that we're already using and keep track of it right there. And so then it also helps us know which interventions are effective for which students. And it helps us keep track of that. It also helps us monitor the interventions for the district. We can go in and look if you have the district rights, I can go in and look and see, okay, which interventions are working for third graders, which interventions are working for this population of third graders, and kind of keep track of all that and kind of go in to a school. So when we're working with our 4 new coaches, we can go in and say, okay, let's kind of focus in on this because we're getting great results here. Not so much here, so let's talk to them and let's share with them what's going on. And so this helps us keep track of that.
You said that if they have the rights, so is there going to be security levels for different people?
Absolutely. It actually pulls that from Infinite Campus for us first. So if you're a teacher, you have access to your students. Principal, you have access to your school. And so then we can go in and change that if we need to. So schools can only see their schools.
Okay.
And then, of course, we'll have all of our state assessment results in there and those kinds of things. This is also really neat, the pinning and collections, because here's, when I first got started as a principal, I struggled a bit with, what data do we look at? What do I show my teachers? I want to talk about it, but I have no idea where to start. This gives us the ability to clip things and put it in a folder and then go have those conversations. And principals don't have to search and look. And so at the district level, I can put things in a folder for a school and say, okay, I'm going to come to you. I want you to open up that folder and we're going to talk about these things. Principals can do that for their teachers also. So they can create data walls that they can look at specific things until we learn exactly what we need to. And then teachers, of course, can still drill down and look at all that they want to. But they can say, let's see, open up your PLC folder and we're going to look at these things today. I can go in and say, okay, I put some things in that folder. Let's have conversations about those. And then here's the program effectiveness that I was talking about earlier. It helps us monitor and watch what things are working, what things are not. That's a big thing that sometimes we just miss out on. You know, we have programs and we try things, and then it's hard to circle back around and make sure what's working and what's not. Then our behavior incident analysis. It gives us, you know, at the district level, we're able to look at all the behaviors of that, and schools can drill down and look at that for themselves as well. And then there's our achievement dashboard that we'll be able to see, which is all of our achievement and all of our academic data right there. I think that's the last one. So what kinds of questions, before Dr. Brumbaugh comes up and talks money and process, any questions I can maybe answer?
I think it sounds phenomenal.
It's really exciting. I've not seen a product that does all of this.
You know, to have, you know, everything's about the data. And to have it all right there at your fingertips, that you can get to it so much quicker, lets you get to those children and to those, you know, those standards and stuff a lot faster too.
I like the accountability aspect of it too. Not only for our students, but for our workers, our teachers, our parents, our everyone, principal.
It's really nice.
All right, good evening. So how did we land on this specific product? It's actually made by a company called Illuminate Education. And basically we put out a request for proposals. When we put that request for proposals out, we asked for a variety of information, things like, you know, the operations. We want to make sure that it's a legitimate company. So talk about the operations of the company, their ability to do all this to integrate with Infinite Campus, their ability to meet the scope of the work, all those little nuances that she talked about. And then, of course, the price of the actual yearly cost of it and the price of the actual, set all this up and the training for all that. So all those were worth different amounts of points. We got 4 different companies to put proposals in, and when the committee reviewed those, Illuminate Education, this product was the one that had the highest number of points that we had before you. So it started off, their proposal came in at a training and setup fee of $9,995, and then an annual cost of $73,641. Our team went back to them, renegotiated, and they lowered their rate just a little over $10,600 to drop that to $63,006.60. So we felt like through some negotiations, we was able to get them to decrease their rate quite a bit.
What about the background checks that's in the contract?
What do you mean by it?
Well, it talks about background checks. But is that included?
Well,
Is it extra?
it's something we put in our contract on people that would be working directly with students.
Right.
On this one, I don't necessarily believe that there'll be any, because none of their employees are going to be working with students. So at this time,
Okay.
there wouldn't be any background checks needed.
Do you think, and this might be more for Dr. Hunter, is there going to be enough time to do training and things of that nature to get this going in the fall? Do you anticipate being able to do this in the fall?
I think what we could do is train our principals first, in the summer, train our principals and probably our coaches first in the summer, and then we'll be able to roll it out that way.
We also began with the end in mind on when we posted this. Mr. Muntz felt like this would be enough time to have everything in place when staff arrived on August 9th, or maybe even earlier.
Yeah, we've talked through it, and that's our plan, to train our leaders this summer and then be able to roll it out this fall.
Okay. Do you have any questions for Dr. Brumbaugh or anything else for Dr. Hunter? No? Okay. All right. Okay, so I need a motion to approve and award the contract for the whole child visualization system to Illuminate Education. The training and setup fee of $9,995 and an annual cost of $63,006.60.
So moved.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Rutherford. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second by Mrs. Coyle. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Thank
Thank
you all
you.
very much. All right. So next on our agenda is Mr. Mark Woods with all of our finance agenda items. And the first one is to approve our 2020-2021 revised working budget.
Good evening. Looks like I will be up here for a little while again this time.
You need a stool.
I will be all right.
Okay.
All right. So we're going to start with a copy of the budget that I gave you. I want to start this off with, this is the fourth time we've seen this working budget at this point. There are not very many changes in this working budget. We did a really good job at the draft, which was back in January. That's the last time we touched this. Bringing things up to date, making sure we were in line everywhere.
What page do we need to start on, Mark?
Let's start just with page 1
Okay.
of the color-coded one. So on there, as we go through, anything that is blue highlighted is the working budget. I've used green for the tentative budget for next year, and we'll go over that in just a few minutes. Just there on the first page, you'll see that we increased our property taxes up to more of an actualized number last time when we did this in January. The change I made there, if you move down to motor vehicle tax, based on our collections and how they've come in, we have increased those. We had talked about it when we built this budget originally. We weren't sure how the pandemic might affect people's livelihoods and other things of that nature, so collections could be down, and we went into it building a budget with collections down, and now we're just adjusting these for what we have actually realized for the year. Moving on to page 2, of course your all's is front and back, your copy. Moving, page 2, I really don't have anything there. I do want to point out on page 3, something you'll notice there, if you compare the total revenue from local sources, they're about midways down the page. If you compare it to the 1920 year, you'll notice that it's up about approximately $829,000. That's due to assessments. Basically, as we've seen, we have a little more motor vehicle come in. That's the difference in what we actually collected for 1920 and what we were budgeting for this year. But what I want to show you how important that really is and where it really comes into play is on the next page, on page 4. We constantly talk about SEEK and how assessments affect our SEEK dollars with the equalization. And we kind of have to get to this a little different way. You'll see that our SEEK for this current year is about $3.7 million lower than it was last year. But in that, and we talked about this, that the state took some of the CARES money and they actually pulled back SEEK and gave it to us in CARES money, so we had to shift expenditures out of what we normally would charge in our SEEK. So when you add that back, that was $2.2 million. Of that we're down. That leaves us with about 1.57 million there that we're still down as compared to last year. So you can see that although our assessments, and we got more money on that side out of the local side, we actually had less state money come in from SEEK. So that's where you get that balance of just adjustments in there and how it works out. That's about a $690,000 difference in our revenue. So
the net difference then, if I'm understanding you correctly, the net difference between the the amount of SEEK that we got, or our state funds last year, 680-something thousand less, or the million?
So it's $690,000 total between, the net between what our local side went up versus what we lost out in SEEK, because our local side did increase as, with the way that equalization factor works out, we got less SEEK dollars. So in net, we ended up with $690,000 less to work with in our budget.
So we got more than $1 million less from the state this year.
Yes. Yeah, it was about $1.5 million total. Yeah. So that's how that, we talk about that all the time when we do budgets, and I talk about how, as our assessments increase, our SEEK dollars go down. There's just exactly how it works out. And yeah, we worked with less dollars this year out of that. So, that's where we go back to the drawing board. We budget really tight. We make sure that we take care of needs, and we find it in the budget and just tighten down a little bit. But I thought that was important to point out. Really, there's no real big changes in here. If you move to page 6, some of that offset of that $690,000, we saw the 130 helped in that. There's a change there, and on page 6, the indirect cost transfers, that has increased, and that is our indirect charge to our ESSER, one of our ESSER pots of money. We're allowed to charge indirect to offset some of our overhead costs that we have. So we were able to charge that indirect fee. It's 10 some odd percent, about 10.4% that we're able to charge in there to offset some of our management fee. Our overhead, our building expenses, everything are built into that. So that does help offset some of that in this budget. Moving on, just on page 7, you can see there where it says total receipts. You can see that's the total right there. If you compare the prior year, which is the first column, that's the actuals from 1920 to what our budget is. It's the $3 million that we started with. So receipts are actual receipts and does not include any beginning balances we move in. Overall, I just went through there and I just picked areas with those small adjustments. I just tweaked some areas in the working budget. Some supplies areas that we needed to add in there. So that is really all the changes we have for that. I mainly just wanted to point out kind of where we were and how that equalization works out. Like I said, this is the 4th time we've looked at this budget, so I really didn't want to beat that one down too much because you're pretty familiar with it.
Anybody have any questions? Okay, so I need a motion to approve the 2020-2021 revised working budget as presented.
So move.
Okay, we have a motion by Mrs. Burford. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
And a second by Mr. Rutherford. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. All right, so Mr. Woods, next is our 2021-2022 tentative budget.
All right, so this is the second time you've seen this budget. We start with the draft in January. This time, when we go to tentative, we do add all of our multi-year funds. So this will have your Fund 2 grants in there and your construction funds, which are multi-year. So that's a big change between the first one. The first time you only see the annual funds that we have, which is majority of it would be our general fund, Fund 1, and then also food service would make up the majority of that. I do want to start, I gave you a summary sheet that says tentative budget notes at the top. Just kind of want to start there, just go over a few highlights real quick. The SEEK base of $4,000 per ADA is in there. That's what we base this budget off. We have a ADA of $10,210.06. That is the 18-19 end of year. We're still using that year. That's what KD's decided was the most accurate year to work off of. And it is minus the model students per legislation. So now that does include the increase for full-day kindergarten, so counting those kids at full instead of half. This budget does not do a change in any property tax revenue. The only thing we've adjusted in there is, like we talked, the motor vehicle tax for the working. We've made the tentative match it because that should be, we should have the same collections next year. As you know, you always have the option of increasing tax revenue up to 4% annually. That's something we do later on. It's not a decision we look at now. That's a decision the board will take in probably August, September, somewhere in that range. Property assessments do tend to increase, especially based on the recent averages. You all have seen home sales and lack of inventory, so those could affect this, but we are not doing any projections on that right now. We will wait and see what our actual numbers are. We did increase the motor vehicle tax, and we've kept the utility taxes flat based on current year collections. Budgeted expenditures, just to highlight just a few real quickly. This has no pay increases built into it, like we talked about when we did the draft. It does have approximately $484,000 increase in salary expenses, and just due to experience steps and potential rank changes of people. This budget does include an increase in our CERS, which is our classified retirement. The rate, the state did a 12% increase on the rate. It increased from 24.06% to 26.95%. That was a little over $300,000 hit to our general fund budget. A little over $300,000. We'll cover, I think I've got that number noted a little further down in here. 360. This budget does not include additional staff for growth. The budget is built off of our allocations. You all approved those allocations at the last meeting, and that's what we built all of our numbers off of, is exactly those teachers and what it takes to fund those teachers for each school. There are 10 buses built into this. We do that every year. That keeps our fleet up and running properly. It does take 10 buses to keep in replacement, so we always budget that. We are not budgeting any use of our capital funds to cover general fund expenditures. You as a board have been very diligent to watch the expenditures over the years and not have to use capital funds to cover operating expenses. We use capital funds to take care of capital projects, so that is very good, and we've continued to do that with this budget. There is a small use of our contingency funds, which we talked about that going in last year as we worked through the year, that, you know, we didn't know how the year would turn out and how we would go into the following year, and we could need to use contingency funds. Right now, with no increase in property taxes budgeted, we do have a small contingency fund, use of contingency fund to offset the expenditures in this budget. You know, we do talk about additional items that we need to consider each year, and that is additional staff. I've put the numbers there. A teacher's approximately $52,000 cost to the general fund, and a paraeducator is about $21,000 after benefits. You know, right now they say the state economy is doing really well. It's just soaring. Who knows when all the final numbers hit? How does COVID-19 hit us? Is it a couple of years down the road before we see that? So we need to be thinking about that a couple of years out and make sure that we understand what our budget needs are even a couple of years out. Future risk management costs, we always have to keep an eye on those. Slips, trips, and falls. We do really good. Dr. Brumbaugh does really good making sure that he gets around and talks to all the schools, make sure they stay safe. Mr. Cash and his crew go out and look at items and make sure that we keep everybody safe so that we don't have slips, trips, and falls that can run up our costs. This next one is a new one I added in there, and we're really starting to see the effects of this, and this is due to COVID, and it's the increased cost of parts, materials, and supplies. It's getting harder and harder to find parts and pieces that we need, and when you find them, you're paying a premium for some of them. So, we have to take that into account for future budgets. Right now, fuel costs are holding okay, but they are creeping up. You all see the pumps every day, so those do have an effect on us long term. As they creep up, even though we have a contract for our fuel costs, we still see some of that, so we'll have to be mindful of those in the future. Medicaid revenues have seemed to hold steady for the past few years, and it seems like we're going to be okay with those. They don't seem to be cutting those right now, so as long as we stay diligent in our billing, we should be okay. Always there's unknowns in property assessments, taxes. You never know how those are going to go. Again, the use of contingency funds, we talk about that there. Potential cuts to federal programs, we always have to be mindful of that. Any further pension reform, we saw a little bit during this last legislative session. They did change. It really didn't impact us dollar-wise as a district, so we're okay for now. There was a bill that kind of hit allowing kids to move around, opening up the borders and everything, which kind of goes along with voucher programs, tax incentives, and things like that. So we have to be mindful of how those might impact us over the future years. We'll see how that goes in this next year. Career centers. We've talked about those just a little bit tonight. We'll be opening 2 career centers. We will have some increased staffing costs as we go into those, so we will have to keep that on our radar and plan for that. Future impact of the end of the CSET program and chemical weapons destruction. They're staying pretty well on track from everything I'm gathering, and they will have a rollout plan of how they're going to end that program, and it will affect our funding and could potentially affect us if we have families move out. Overall, how do we keep funding safety requirements as they start to mandate them out of the Safety and Resiliency Act? How do we fund any future increases for our staff? How do we increase revenue? Those are things we've got to, look at over time. And then how do we keep providing the same level of services if we do see drops in funding? That's our number one goal in this district, is even if we have drops in funding, to make sure we provide the same level or better to all of our students. And Madison County's done a great job of that over the years. So from there, let's jump back into the budget, the one that has all the highlights. As you can see back on page 1 there in the green, we do anticipate ending the current year that we're in, the 2021 year, with our full unassigned balance, which is our contingency fund. So we expect to have that intact and not to use any of that this year and to carry it into next year. Again, moving down the page, you see we don't have any increases budgeted for property taxes. The only increase we did on that page is to match what we did with the working budget in our motor vehicle taxes. Moving over to page 2. Nothing really there that you haven't seen before. We talk about omitted property tax. Those are state audits. It's never guaranteed, so we get what we get out of that. We've held right around that $100,000 amount, plus or minus just a little bit for several years now. So that's a pretty good budget in there. Doesn't look like investments are going up anytime soon, so we're not increasing those. I wish I had better news on that. I wish I could find ways to get better numbers, but rates are just really low all across the nation. Move you over to page 4 and let's talk about SEEK a little bit. So you'll see that SEEK for next year is up. We've built this SEEK. I actually worked with the state to get a projection for next year. It's built on the $4,000 base per pupil, and it is a 10,210.06 AADA. That does include, again, it does include the kindergartners being counted as full instead of half. While it is up, and going through the numbers, the net effect to our general fund is really only $384,000. So if you take the budget that we have for this current year, add back the $2.2 million that we talked about, that runs that up to an actual, what we should have had in seat. The $384,000, after the kindergarten add-in and everything, and we took all of our local effort cuts, our capital outlay goes up because it's $100 per student. So when you add students on the AADA, you have to put more into your capital outlay, which is less you get in seat. And then when you take into account how that affects, they project our assessments for the year. So they increase our required contribution into our FSBK building fund. And so when you net that against what our increase in SEEK was, we really had an additional $384,000 to work with in this budget. So, and I think we've discussed that when we started looking at the potential of adding the full-day kindergarten. What was the net effect? That was asked by the board, and we were right around that number. Those are really good estimates. It was $300,000, we said would be about the net effect. So that's what the district's going to realize to help in a budget.
And so, Mr. Woods, just to clarify a couple of things, when you look at, if you're comparing those three numbers with the SEEK total program, last year, this year, and then projected for next, that middle column should really be, if you add that offset through the CARES funding, that should really be 39,539.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So you can see we went down about $1.5 million because property assessments went up
Yes.
this year. And then we're going to go up about 700,000 maybe because of full-day kindergarten.
Yes.
But that's assuming no increase in property tax.
Right.
And when you
again,
when you consider that, and when you consider what's already in that in the Tier 1 funding, it's going to be a net of only about $400,000.
yes. And the state uses a fairly conservative projection of our assessment increases. They kind of look at some trend data. So the trend data won't really catch all this swing in sales. And, you know, if our assessments are higher than what they gave us on the projection, that means our SEEK money will actually go down more. So this is if we hit all targets as projected. It's a net of $384,000. So potentially that number could be lower. Moving on in here, I'll take you over to page 6. The indirect cost transfers, you notice I dropped them back down. It's kind of hard to do these budgets with the way the ESSER funds are. ESSER funds are multi-year funds. So just to let you know, when we get to the working budget, I will increase indirect because this does not look at any funds that are in the current year that are multi-year. It only looks at the ones that start next year. So we have to make those changes in the working budget, so that's why there's a decrease there. So we'll actually change the budget to add indirect for next year once we get to the working budget. It's just a nuance of the system, and unfortunately, the way we have to do it makes it a little harder to do budgets. Moving on, we'll go on over to page 8, and that's where we start talking about our expenditures. You've seen most of these. The big item there is under instruction. The first two lines are for staff. It's for salaries and benefits. And you can see the difference, the increase there. That's where we adjusted most of this budget. After we went through and we ran all the numbers for the allocation, this is our best projection of where we'll be based on our allocated teachers to each school. I sat down with, I have another report that shows every teacher name that's coded to each line item in this budget. And I sat down with that and actually ran hard numbers of where they should be for next year. And do we, we gave this school 20 teachers. Are there 20 people accounted for down through there? And what 20 people is it? Is it the proper 20? And so that should be a pretty strong number for us, but that's where we've made all the big adjustments in this. And it's just realizing what we have to do every year and meeting our allocation formula. Moving on down, page 9, we have the traditional note in there. Under employee benefits, that our work comp and everything falls out in that line. I will take you on down, and you'll see on page 11, when we get into student transportation, you'll see that we have the 10 buses there in the budget, but you may look over and go, why is it double in the current year? And I failed to mention this earlier, but here's what happens each year, and it'll always be that way on your budget. When we end a year and we encumber for buses, because we have to order them in June in order to get them during a school year. And so we encumber for them. Well, we put that encumbrance on the book. That encumbrance has to be carried to the next year. We will actually pay for those buses at December. So we'll have the actual payment of the buses that we carried over from encumbrance plus your budget for your new year that you got to encumber for. So always your current year will be double. So that's why it looks a little odd if you go, well, did we order double the buses? No, we did not. And on a side note there, the Volkswagen settlement, I haven't reduced that budget in the working budget at all because we haven't received that money.
I was just going to ask about that.
Mr. Lakes is taking buses this week. There's a facility that will destroy them the way they need to be destroyed and helps us. They take the pictures and everything. He's in the process of doing that this week and next week. We get those pictures, he'll submit the paperwork that has to be turned in for that. And once they've evidenced that, then they will file our claim and we'll wait for the money to come in. I'm expecting it'll probably be July, August when we see the actual funds come in. So that's why there's no reduction there. And the 2 years look very different. So I did want to point that out to you. Moving along to page 13, and I did mention that we are still budgeting a reduction in our contingency. We were able to offset it with the increased money that was in SEEK. The final reduction is about $250,000. So that's really good compared to where we were. We've been able to go through and offset that. And, as soon as we know our property assessments and how our tax money, what the final dollars are there, we will try and offset that first and not use any contingency funds at all next year. But in order to make this a balanced budget, which we have to be at 0, the only place to do that right now is we have to show it coming out of the contingency. And I think we were up around 700,000 last time. So a lot of unknown numbers at that time, so we were able to get those to a more realized number. Moving on, page 14 starts Fund 2, your special, that's all your federal and state grants and any local grants we might have fall in Fund 2. That's new to the budget this time. Tentative is the first time you see those. And those are, you budget 0 balance, that's where you try to get to. No real items in there to go over. After Fund 2, we've already, Fund 21 is next, and that's the district activity funds of the school. That's the money that they sweep over from their school accounts to us, and we hold as a fiduciary for them. And no changes in that budget. You've already seen that in the draft. That starts on page 22. After Fund 2, or after Fund 21, I'm sorry, the next one that's noted in there, just because it's fun, is the new Fund 25. That's student activity money. We have to record those in our books. That's the money they actually hold at the school level. You all review those accounts twice a year. We bring the balances to you and let you look at those. We just have to do a journal entry and record all their revenue and expenditures. I do that. I've got it up through February at this point. It's a pretty big task because I actually have to look at every transaction they do on the school level in order to make that entry. So I sat down with that and get through it. But we do not have to budget for that because there's no way to budget that. And the state doesn't require it, so that's why you see no budget in Fund 25. Moving on, page 29, capital outlay funds. I increased based on AADA. We talked about that. It's $100 per AADA pupil. You'll see there on the restricted state revenue, I increased that. It was the $983,934 that shows in the current year budget. It increased based on the ADA number, so I did have to up the budget. Those are for building projects. That's what we hold those for. And we've been very diligent about using those. Moving on to, starting on page, oops, skipped one there. On page 31 starts our FSPK. We call it a lot of different things. It's another building fund. We call it the nickels. You all are used to hearing it called the nickels. Same thing, when we get our SEEK projection, we do have to increase the property taxes on this side because we have to put more money into there. That's all I've done. We use this money first to make our bond payments, and any leftover out of that after we make all of our bond payments is used on construction projects. Page 34, construction. Right now, all we do is we take the excess of the two pots of money built into this, which is the capital outlay and the excess of the FSPK after we pay our bond payments. We roll those into just a budget number for construction that's not actual. It will be whatever our projects are, and we will put actual in there as we get BG1s in place and start after we get bids and things, so. $37, just so you know what that one is, that's Fund 400 is your debt service fund, so that's actually where the payments get paid out of for all of our bond payments. So we have to, that's the way the accounting works, we have to transfer money from FSPK to Fund 400 to cut a check out of Fund 400. It's just the way they have us do it. So, multi-steps. On page 39 there, you'll see that there is an increase in our debt service for next year, and that's the bonds from where we sold for the Career Center and ATC. So that should be expected. The next, starting on page 40, is Fund 51, Food Service. And this one's kind of a fun one to budget. Nina Thacker actually worked on this for me. She took this on. We are going to be on a modified summer school feeding number for next year. The way they're going to reimburse us, it's going to be reimbursed similar to the summer feeding, so we're going to get the higher rates, but there's going to be some other stipulations built in there. So she actually sat down and looked at 1 month that we had all of our kids in school this year, which was the April-May time frame. And she took that, broke that down into a daily rate, and then built the revenue off of how many days of school do we have, and that's how we've built this budget. It's our best estimate at what we think it might hit So we do have a method to our madness. I do thank her for her work. She did a lot of really good work on this piece. And then from there, we just budget out, after we get our revenue on that, we budget out what we think we're going to spend in food and other costs, personnel mainly. Those are the two big items, food and personnel. That's food service. The other items that are really left throughout the budget when you see some of these funds, they're the two that have an 8 number. One says governmental assets, that's on page 47, and then on page 50, food service assets. That's where we have to run our depreciation out of every year. You will not have a budget for that. We do not budget for that. That's why all you see is stuff in the actual columns, and that is just where we depreciate our assets out of, as required by GAAP. So that kind of runs you through the summary of the budget. I'll leave it open for you all to ask questions.
Any questions?
Do we know about, have we looked at what it's going to cost to open up the career centers with employees?
Recurring employee costs for just your administrative side in there, you're talking roughly about $300,000 just for that. And then I think with some of the programming we already have and everything, we'll be able to shift a lot of people instead of having to add. So there may be a few teachers here and there that we might need to add, but I don't think it'll be a large number if we have to at all.
We're going to add a guidance counselor though, right? We're not moving guidance counselors.
Our plan is to add a counselor, yes.
And that would be included
That's
in
what I
that
thought.
300,000 number that I projected.
Back on that Volkswagen
Mm-hmm.
thing. Remind me again, is it 50% reimbursement for new purchases up to a certain amount? Or
Yeah, we identified 4 buses that met their criteria, and we got 50%, so basically they're paying for 2 of our buses this year.
We'll take it.
Yes, we will take any offset we can get at any time.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have anything? No? Okay. All right, can we get a motion to approve the 2021-2022 tentative budget as presented?
So moved.
Second.
That kind of took me off guard there for a minute. So we have
We're
a
all just
motion by
looking at each other.
Mrs. Burford, a second by Mrs. Coyle. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Thank you. All right, and next up is our school activity fund budgets.
As a requirement of, as we know, the regulations as Red Book, which are the accounting procedures for school activity funds, they're required to submit a budget for next year for all their student activity funds. Really, they don't know what fundraisers they're going to do. They do a decent job. That's really what they're saying is we think we might do these fundraisers, and here's what we might bring in and what our expenditures might be. So that's really all we're doing here. We're following procedure. They're doing their budgets. They've compiled all of them. The principals have sent them all in, and that's what you have in front of you.
Do we have any questions on any of the student activity fund balances?
It's a
Or
lot.
budgets, I'm sorry.
It's a lot of fundraisers.
It is.
All right, well, if we don't have any questions, do I have a motion to approve the fiscal year 2022 school activity fund budgets as presented?
So moved.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Rutherford. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
And a second by Mrs. Burford. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Thank you. And then next up is designate 2022 fund balances.
So what we're asking here is for, we have to do this motion every year in order to move things around at year end. Asking that you all approve this motion to give me the authority to set fund balances for you and to go through and finalize out everything and close out the books.
Okay. Do you have any questions? We had all that information. So I need a motion to authorize the Chief Financial Officer to designate 2021 fund balances for site-based carryover, sick leave restriction, funds obligated for purchases, future personnel expenditures, facility maintenance, capital projects, property costs, or other items as needed.
So moved.
All right, we have a motion by
Second.
Mrs. Coyle and a second by Mr. Rutherford. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. Thank you. And then next up is to uncommit our 2020-2021 funds for Kisbit obligation.
So basically, and this is it's got a few other items in the actual motion there, but what this does is this allows me to take items that you all have already committed, and it allows me to go in and pull them in to our current year for things that you said you wanted to use them for as we were preparing. It allows me to pull those in and actually put them in the current year's amounts as beginning balances, and for us to use them to finish out the year and then recommit funds.
Pull them from here to here.
Yes.
Does anybody have any questions? No? Okay. So I need a motion to authorize the Chief Financial Officer to uncommit our 2020-2021 funds for Kisbit obligation, expenses, special projects, and for capital projects as needed. Do I have a motion?
So move.
All right, we have a motion by Mrs. Burford. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Coyle. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, and then bond of depositories.
All right, so we found out yesterday these are actually going to have a new name. They're going to call them pledges of collateral, and they're going to change the form. So we will get you a different form to sign. We've already sent them out to the banks. What this does is we're required to have some kind of surety of our money in banks, especially if we have money that is above the $250,000 FDIC limit. A lot of our schools use formerly People's Bank, Whitaker Bank now. They use them as their bank, and so we look at their student activity funds. We take off the $250,000 FDIC limit, and then we work with the bank to get them to pledge securities that should they fail, that our funds are protected and we would be paid out on. And that is all this is. We also have that with Fort Bank, because we do have 2 CDs with them that are over the $250,000. So they are pledging securities in our name, and that would pay out should we have a bank default or anything like that. They would pay out and pay our funds back to the board. And this is in accordance with KRS, and we do watch the items that they use as pledge. We do make sure that they conform with KRS.
All right, do we have any questions? So we're just making sure all of our money over $250,000 is protected.
Yes.
All right, do we have, so I need a motion to approve a bond of depository with Fort Bank and a bond of depository with Whitaker Bank as presented.
So moved.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Rutherford. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
And a second by Mrs. Burford. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. And then finally, to hire a finance auditor provider.
All right, so I think it was 2 sessions ago, maybe, it might have been, it was either March or April. You all, we brought before you, and you had agreed to move forward with, I still call them Stiles and Associates, but we had decided to move on with them, continue another year of the contract. I did receive a phone call that they would not be able to provide our contract for this year, our audit services for this year, due to a medical issue with the partner. We were the furthest east of all of his clients, and given the nature of his medical condition, he didn't feel that he could provide our services for us. So as soon as I found that out, we got a request for proposal out. We sent it out. I sent it out to 7 CPA firms that we identified. We used the KDE list and kind of looked through them to identify approved auditors that are in our area, that do school audits, that have a background in this. I do think with timing and other things, tax season was extended this year, so several of them were in that. Some of them had already taken on all their clients they were going to take on. We had 2 respondents. We had Barnes and Denning and Company and Patrick and Associates. We are recommending for hire to the board Patrick and Associates. When we evaluated it and we did our scoring, they scored the highest. It was a very, very close score. They are a smaller firm. We do think we're going to get a really good service out of them. The lead partner was once an employee of the Auditor of Public Accounts. There's a lot of experience there. They did come highly recommended from another school district, and that finance officer does have many years of experience, so I feel comfortable with this firm, and we would put them up for recommendation to hire.
So are they agreeing to do this at the same rate as what?
They did have the chance to bid their own rates. It did come in, I think it came in the same as what I'm looking back at Dr. Brumbaugh and Nina because we were the scorers, and I can't remember offhand, but I think it's the same as what we were going to pay. The contract does have multi-years built into it. If we agree with the firm and want to continue, we do have that built into this contract, but it is at the board's discretion, and it's at that firm's discretion as well. They have the right to opt out and not provide further years. It is a year-to-year. We do have that right. We can always take it back out for proposal a lot earlier if we decide next year that we want to do so. We're kind of under some time constraints. It's a very unfortunate situation, and I do feel for Brian Woosley, and I do appreciate all the service he's given us over the years. So timing kind of hit us. We have to get an auditor hired and submitted to the state very quickly. We've tried to hit these timelines as fast as we could when we were notified of what we were dealing with.
Is this will they be able to get into Munis? Is this what this group is that gets in? And does?
So they do have some background with that, and I know the finance officer that recommended them said they are very good with Munis as well. Brian Woosley's probably the best, and his people are the best with that. This group has studied up, and they're trying to make that part of their niche as well. They are out of Winchester, so they are fairly local. It does help with us that 2 years ago we went to scanning all of our documents for all the checks and everything we cut. That will help in the audit because we got so much electronic data for them now.
I hear a reservation in your voice, so why is that? Just because you're getting someone new, or?
There's always reservation when you switch auditors. We had a really good working relationship with Brian Woosley and his crew. They'd been here for a number of years. Their familiarity with Munis is top-notch. So most of it's around that and just going into new. I know there's a lot of back testing that they have to do. I know what my job is going to entail taking on a new auditor. They have to get a familiarity and a comfort level with us before they actually do their full audit work, which means a whole lot of extra testing,
Yeah.
which means we're going to be really busy. So it's not about the company itself. I think they are very well qualified. And I would not put anybody before this board that I did not feel was qualified.
Well, I think it's just unfortunate with Mr. Woosley.
Absolutely.
Anybody else have anything?
This is just for 1 year, correct?
It will be.
Up
for-
to 4.
We could go up to 5 total,
5 total, okay.
but this is just for one, we are only committed for this 1 year.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay. All right, I just need a motion to approve and hire Patrick and Associates as our financial audit provider for 2021. Okay, never mind, forget that. As our audit provider.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Rutherford. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
And a second by Mrs. Burford. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Woods.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you to both of you.
Yes,
Ms.
thank you,
Thackerty.
thank you. All right. So next up, we have a couple of items from technology. Our first one is just to approve our standard annual agreement with Microsoft. Ben, is there anything we need to say about this?
Not really. What that does is it gives us the keys to the kingdom for Microsoft. It gives us all of the abilities to license our Windows stations, that kind of stuff. So
It's
if
just
you have
our
any questions
stand-
for me.
Just our standard annual agreement. We do this every year.
Yeah.
All right, do we have any questions? No? Okay. So I need a motion to approve the Microsoft agreement as presented.
So moved.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Coyle. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
And a second by Mr. Rutherford. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. And then next on our agenda is just our technology report.
Yeah.
And we have Mr. Ben Burnett with us.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I should do a little song and dance or something just because, Mr. Woods did such a good job back there, but he will hopefully beat me in scope. And so anyway, the district technology plan is just it's a plan that's set forth by KDE. They give us a general outline on how to do that. And so what it is it's just a district level planning experience is what they call it, to engage stakeholders in the ongoing implementation of ed tech strategies for student learning. So if you read through that document, you will not see an exhaustive list of everything we do. There are 7 domains in there. We have robust infrastructure. We've got data security. That's the big one that's in the news right now. You won't see an exhaustive list of everything we do for data security. But I'll just hit a few of the highlights, and then feel free to ask me any questions you like. I can answer hopefully as many of those as you ask, and so we'll just kind of go from there. But as we start out, you'll see in that district technology plan just a list of goals that we have from last year and the ways that we met those. And so we had some goals last year like working with our teachers to train and implement technology in the classroom. Now, obviously last year was kind of a crazy year, and so we did meet some of those goals. We hired a director of instructional technology that works with Dr. Hunter to train a lot of our teachers. We built a team of e-coaches. We renovated a space for technology training. We've gone on and on and on through that. And so we met a lot of our goals in ways that we never even imagined, but those goals were met in a timely fashion. And so as we jump into robust infrastructure and ecosystem, that one's the one you'll see the most of because that was my area before I was director, right? And so you'll see a lot of wireless and switches and my favorite thing that it says, AA1 is continue to provide the nation's first, fastest, highest quality, and most reliable internet access to 100% of Kentucky public schools. We absolutely do that. And so as you look through infrastructure, you'll see many, many things in there. You'll see our Microsoft agreement we just approved. You will see an upgrade to a new virus scanning software we'd like to implement. That's one of those things we plan to do. And I made sure I put a $0 balance budget in that one because that is something we already have access to thanks to our Microsoft agreement. And so there are many things in there. The only other one that I'll hit with infrastructure is one that, though it is something we do and provide, it is not something that is in the school system. And it's something that I don't know that we ever thought we would really be in the business of, and that is hotspots for our kids. And so this past year, obviously, we had to look at the equity of our internet access for our students. We had to look at how do we get them devices and all those kinds of things. You all know all of that. And yet, I just want to brag on our school staffs for just a minute because overnight we did this amazing thing where we put devices into the hands of kids. And we dropped back, we drew back and figured out a way to make instruction happen in a very, very timely and efficient fashion. And so in this document, we provide students with cellular hotspots and provide outdoor wireless at all of our school locations. And we are going to continue to do that. Now, we don't know what the scope of that is going to look like this year, and yet it's something that we did well in the past, and so I wanted to highlight that. As we move forward, we have data security, safety, and privacy. Again, that is something that we could go on and on and on about, right? It's been in the news. We've talked about ransomware, all kinds of things. But just a few of the things that I'll hit, and really just one, is that over the course of this past week, we have been implementing this thing called two-factor authentication. So what it does, it's something you've probably seen with your banks. It is a way just to kind of approve who has access to your account. And so even though you have access to your username and password, what we find in the news is that those things are broken. And so if you have a second way to stop people from accessing your account, it just helps. And so that is one of the things we've implemented with our teachers, our leadership, and on and on. We have budgets and resources. I'm actually going to skip that one completely because you just got a wonderful presentation on all of the budgeting and resources that we do. The next domain level is partnerships. Partnerships are just the ways that we reach out in the community to better work with people, not only to help us, but to help them as well. And so one of our partnerships that is actually not on here, but we've hit in another domain area, was our partnership with Verizon and the fact that we got those hotspots out so quickly. And so there are wireless solutions in there, there's hardware standards, all that kind of stuff. But all those partnerships help us to just be a better technology department as a whole. Moving forward, we have digital curriculum, instruction, and assessment. This was something we worked very closely with Dr. Hunter's team with to just try and make sure that all of our initiatives are met in the best way that we can. And so one of the things that I'll touch on, our first standard was to sustain, support, and strengthen confidence in technology abilities, to effectively interweave technology and intervention strategies into daily lessons, which are authentic, complex, and complete in collaborative learning context. And so basically what that means is we're going to try to use technology in the most custom way possible so that students can have a learning experience that meets their needs in kind of an individual way. And so there's lots of that that we could touch on, but what we'll do is we'll take our technology initiatives and our learning initiatives and kind of mix those two together. We have our personalized professional learning. As an educational board, you know that is so key. And so throughout this year, we're going to be conducting trainings. We're going to cultivate a network of technology teams within each school. That was one of our goals that we're going to continue on. We're going to identify those teachers that are just excellent in what they do and have a passion and a drive for it. And so we're going to empower them to reach out and continue that training in their schools as we empower them with some of the information that maybe they don't have. And lastly, we have the use of space and time. Now, I know what Dr. Gillum's thinking. He's thinking, Ben, you don't need any training in how to take up space. But what that does is it helps us to further utilize our spaces and our time to just be as efficient and the best that we can be with our technology resources and the way that our teachers teach, all those kinds of things. And so we have various collaborative resources that obviously we have used heavily this year with this distance learning piece that we've had. We continue to provide information and resources to help teachers and students transition more and more learning content to digital formats. And so that was a whole lot in a very short amount of time, but I just wanted to touch base on those things and then take any questions that you have. And so as a board, are there any questions over the district technology plan?
I know we've set the date to get the return of our Chromebooks. How is that going and how is it? Are we getting them back?
Right, that's a good question. We are. And so we have been setting, actually I think that date has been happening kind of fluidly throughout our schools for this week. And so my wife, she works at Foley, and so she's been talking to me about they've gotten the majority of them back at this point. I think they just have 20 or so. Most of our schools, they report that they're getting most of them back, that they're working well, that things are not broken like I was afraid they would be, right, from a director standpoint. So yeah, that is going well so far.
And in the process of cleaning and keeping everyone healthy, I'm sure that we're sanitizing
Yes,
them
ma'am.
and ready to get them out the door next year.
Yes, ma'am. We have a product called a Zap Bag, and what that does is it heats a device up to about 120 degrees. It does that over an extended period of time, so it kills all germs, viruses, any any bugs that may live in that device, any of that kind of stuff. And so it's been, we have 2 to 3 of those out per school as of right now. Our high school's having some, more than others.
Right.
And so, yeah, we've been sanitizing and working to make sure that our data that's coming back is as, or our devices that are coming back are as neat and tight as they can be. Have data on the brain.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of that, though, do we have to do anything to like check the operating system or anything like that? Make sure we don't have any viruses or anything like that that could cause us problems?
Sure.
The next time another student opens that computer?
So that's actually the nice thing about the Chromebook that we've been sending home. And so with that Chromebook, Chromebooks have virus protection kind of built into them. And then the other thing about a Chromebook is it is very user specific. And so you can leave that device, go log into another Chromebook with your account. All of your settings will transfer, and yet nothing is stored the way we have things set up. Nothing is stored on like a profile basis. And so when somebody comes back to that device, there's literally nothing there they can find. So,
Great. That's a good security feature too.
yeah.
Okay. Anybody else have anything? All right. We don't have any motion or anything. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you all.
Appreciate the update.
Thank you, Ben.
Yep.
All right. Okay. Do we have any comments from the board? Have anything?
I'll just speak. Last week we had our graduations, and I just want to say that Mr. Ray, Mr. Fritz, their staff, their janitors did an absolute fantastic job. Both went perfect. Weather was perfect, and I've heard nothing but good things from everyone. And I think we may have set a new standard for graduations after this last week.
And they were-
Everybody that said that was so organized and went just really fluent. And really, to keep into the time span that we've done at Eastern, that was remarkable too. With what was going on, 6 feet apart. It took forever to come out.
I think one of the things that I heard that struck the most was that the parents and the kids felt like it was more personal being at the school rather than being at alumni. So that was a good thing to hear.
So stay tuned for what they'll do next year.
Yep.
Anybody else?
They might continue. I mean, they continued with the parades, which everyone loves, so that was great too.
Who knows? Anybody else?
We just need to provide fans.
No rain, no rain.
Okay. All right, well, if no one has anything else, I just need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Rutherford. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second by Mrs. Boyle. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. We are adjourned.